November 13th, 1942, 01:48 hours. Imagine dedicating your entire life, decades of rigorous training to mastering the art of night combat. You are the undisputed king of the darkness. Then in one terrifying moment you realize the night you so meticulously owned has become your gravest enemy. A dark curtain, where unseen shadows hunt you with lethal precision. What would it feel like to watch everything you believed in, every tactical advantage, simply vanish? Commander Tamichi Har, gripping the bridge railing of his destroyer Amatsukaze in the infamous Iron Bottom Sound, was living that nightmare. Starshells burst above, momentarily illuminating his ship in a blinding, cruel white light. For 20 long years, the Imperial Japanese Navy had perfected fighting in the dark. It was their gospel, their unbreakable edge. But now, American shells were crashing around his ship before his lookouts could even spot the muzzle flashes. Through the bridge windows, Har witnessed something that defied 2 decades of naval doctrine, something utterly impossible. American ships were firing with terrifying accuracy from beyond 10,000 yards in pitch darkness. Their shells arrived with mechanical, almost surgical precision. No searchlights betrayed their positions. No star shells signaled their salvos. It was like fighting ghosts. The USS Helena's radar-directed guns had found Amatsukaze, and when Har, desperate, left his own searchlights on too long trying to pinpoint his attackers, those American 6-inch shells ripped through his ship, killing 43 of his crew. Just 3 kilometers away, the mighty battleship Hiei, the pride of the Imperial fleet, a veteran of Pearl Harbor, shuddered under an onslaught from enemies her lookouts couldn't see. She was being systematically destroyed, ripped apart by an invisible foe. What no Japanese officer yet understood was that they were witnessing the deployment of the SG surface search radar, a technology that would transform naval warfare. It would shatter Japan's most crucial tactical advantage in a mere 18 months. This wasn't just about ships lost. It was about the sudden, brutal obsolescence of 20 years of training, of doctrine, of a national strategy built on one fundamental, now broken assumption: that the Imperial Japanese Navy owned the night. Japan's mastery of night combat was a legacy, honed since the Russo-Japanese War of 1904. At the Battle of Tsushima, Admiral Togo's torpedo boats had devastated the Russian fleet under the cloak of darkness. That victory became etched in their very being, making night combat the bedrock of Japan's strategy against numerically superior enemies. By 1942, this doctrine had evolved into the most sophisticated night fighting system in the world. Japanese sailors trained relentlessly in the dark. Lookouts underwent specialized programs, spending hours in darkened rooms, avoiding vitamin A deficiencies, practicing distance estimation in low light. An average Japanese lookout could spot ship silhouettes at 7,000 meters on a moonless night, twice the distance of their American counterparts. The technological gap, they thought, only confirmed their superiority. While America fumbled with primitive radar sets that most captains distrusted, Japanese optics were world-leading. Their binoculars, manufactured by Nippon Kogaku, now Nikon, offered exceptional magnification and light-gathering capability. And then there were the Type 93 long-lance torpedoes, capable of striking targets at 24,000 yards, far beyond any range at which American ships could ever detect them at night. The early Pacific War validated every single assumption. At the Battle of Savo Island on August 9, 1942, Japanese cruisers annihilated an Allied force in just 33 minutes of night combat, sinking 4 heavy cruisers without losing a single ship. Later, at Tassafaranga, on November 30th, a single Japanese destroyer squadron would savage a superior American cruiser force, torpedoing 4 ships in minutes. They were untouchable, or so they believed. Unknown to the Imperial Navy, a revolution was exploding in American shipyards and laboratories. The SG surface search radar, guided by minds at the MIT Radiation Laboratory, was a quantum leap from those primitive sets that had failed so miserably at Savo Island. Operating on a 10-centimeter wavelength with a staggering 50 kilodollar power output, the SG radar could detect a destroyer at 15 nautical miles and track it accurately enough for blind firing at 10 miles. This miracle technology was founded on the British cavity magnetron, a device delivered by the Tizard mission in September 1940. Historian James Finney Baxter III called it the most valuable cargo ever brought to our shores. America didn't just understand it, they mass-produced it. Approximately 1,000 SG radar sets were built during the war. The first Fletcher-Class destroyer, the USS Fletcher, commissioned on June 30, 1942, carried this revolutionary system as standard equipment. By November 1942, she was in the Solomon Islands. The Plan Position Indicator, PPI scope on these ships offered a god's-eye view of the battle space, displaying all contacts on a circular screen that updated every 2 seconds. Operators could distinguish ship types, track torpedo wakes, even spot periscope depth submarines. It worked equally well in daylight or darkness, clear weather or storms, smoke or fog. This radar wasn't just for detection. It was integrated with the Mark 37 gun director, linked to an analog computer that could calculate firing solutions in seconds, automatically adjusting for target speed, course, wind, and ship motion. The Fletcher-Class 5-inch 38 caliber guns, firing 15 to 20 rounds per minute, now had radar-directed accuracy. The night of November 12 to 13, 1942, would begin the brutal shattering of Japanese assumptions. The naval battle of Guadalcanal began when Rear Admiral Daniel Callahan's task force intercepted Vice Admiral Hiroaki Abe's bombardment group. While only USS Fletcher was the new destroyer class, several ships, including USS Helena, carried the SG radar. At 1:24 hours, Helena's SG radar detected Japanese ships at 27,000 yards, far beyond visual range. For the next 20 minutes, American radar operators tracked the approaching Japanese force, while Japanese lookouts strained, futilely, into the oppressive darkness. Then pure chaos. American radar-directed fire disrupted Japanese formations before they could even employ their superior night-fighting tactics. The destroyer Akatsuki, attempting her specialized night torpedo attack, was caught in radar-directed crossfire from multiple American ships. She exploded and sank in minutes, a chilling testament to the new reality. Commander Haruno Matsukaze experienced this new, terrifying reality firsthand. His ship successfully torpedoed the USS Barton, breaking her in half, and crippled the USS Juneau. But when he illuminated the USS San Francisco with his searchlights, desperate to improve his gunnery, the USS Helena's radar-directed guns immediately found Matsukaze in the darkness, causing severe damage and heavy casualties. Admiral Abe's flagship, the battleship Hiei, became the merciless focus of American radar-directed fire. In darkness and rain squalls that should have provided concealment, she absorbed 85 shell hits from enemies firing at ranges beyond Japanese visual capability. Her bridge was wrecked, her steering destroyed, her superstructure ablaze. She would be scuttled the next day, the first Japanese battleship lost in the war. The disparity in night fighting grew starker through late 1942 and early 1943. The American SG radar was a marvel, 3 gigahertz, 50 kilowatt peak power, detecting destroyers at 15+ nautical miles with astonishing accuracy, plus 40 yards range, plus 0 calorie bearing. Lightweight at 1,000 lbs, it had a 95% operational availability. In chilling contrast, Japan's Type 22 radar operated at a paltry 150 MHz with only 2 kW peak power, detecting destroyers at 10 nautical miles under optimal conditions with poor accuracy, plus 300 yards, range plus 5 degree bearing. It weighed 2,200 lbs and had a miserable 40% operational availability. Of the first 60 Type 22 sets, only about 6 actually worked. Total Japanese radar production during the entire war was about 300 units, less than a third of just American SG production. This technological gap wasn't just about numbers. It revealed deeper organizational failures. Japan had actually developed cavity magnetrons by 1937, and Dr. Hidetsugu Yagi had invented the directional antenna that bore his name in 1926. Yet, military leadership excluded Yagi from radar work. When Japanese forces captured British radar equipment with Yagi antennas, they were unaware the design referred to a Japanese invention. Army-Navy rivalry prevented coordination, with both services developing separate, incompatible systems. It was a catastrophic national oversight. The Tokyo Express, those high-speed destroyer runs to resupply Guadalcanal, had depended entirely on Japan's night-fighting superiority. These missions, commanded by the finest destroyer captains in the Imperial Navy, began suffering increasing losses to radar-equipped American ships. Captain Raizo Tanaka, who led many of these runs, would later write in 1956, acknowledging the growing American radar advantage. His own tactical brilliance had achieved success at Tassafaronga, but he recognized that darkness no longer offered protection against American technology. By early 1943, American destroyers were intercepting Tokyo Express runs in complete darkness, in rain, in squall conditions. They fired first, fired accurately, and pursued Japanese forces even when they fled at full speed into the night. It was a complete reversal. The night of November 25, 1943 was a chilling demonstration. 5 destroyers under Captain Arleigh Burke intercepted 5 Japanese destroyers off Cape St. George. In a running battle fought entirely by radar, Burke's squadron sank 3 Japanese destroyers, Onami, Makinami, and Yugiri, without taking significant damage. The Japanese never achieved visual contact with their attackers. This would be the last surface engagement in the Solomon Islands and signaled the grim end of major surface combat in the area. By mid-1943, Japanese naval commanders were desperately trying to adapt. The death of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto in April 1943 removed the one leader who might have best understood the implications of American technological superiority. Japanese attempts to counter proved futile. They deployed rudimentary radar countermeasures, aluminum strips called gimenshi or deception paper, but these were ineffective against the sophisticated SG radar. Japanese radar development, hamstrung by inter-service rivalry and resource constraints, remained years behind. Commander Tamichi Har, who miraculously survived the war as the only destroyer captain from Pearl Harbor to do so, would later write in his memoir Japanese Destroyer Captain about the growing, horrifying realization among Japanese officers that their night-fighting expertise had become utterly obsolete. His assessment of American technological superiority was tragically accurate. The Battle of Empress Augusta Bay on November 2, 1943, provided the clearest, most brutal demonstration of radar's transformation of naval combat. Rear Admiral Aaron Merrill's Task Force 39, including several Fletcher-Class destroyers with the latest SG radar modifications, intercepted a superior Japanese force. At 02:27 hours, radar contact at 35,900 yards gave the Americans complete tactical advantage. For the next hours, American ships tracked the approaching enemy with perfect clarity, maneuvering for optimal firing positions while remaining utterly invisible to Japanese lookouts. The American destroyers demonstrated capabilities that must have seemed supernatural to Japanese observers. Ships engaged at ranges exceeding 14,000 yards in total darkness, scoring hits with their first salvos. They detected and evaded long-lance torpedoes by tracking their wakes on radar, then counterattacked the launching destroyers without ever making visual contact. The battle's outcome shocked the Japanese high command. Despite superior numbers and firepower, their force was routed, losing a light cruiser and a destroyer while inflicting minimal damage. As Samuel Eliot Morison noted, this battle marked the end of Japan's advantage in night engagements. The psychological impact on Japanese naval personnel transcended mere tactical defeat. Men who had spent years perfecting their night fighting skills watched helplessly as technology rendered their expertise worthless. The erosion of morale was heartbreakingly documented in Japanese operational reports. Those vaunted long-lance torpedoes, launched at radar-guided estimates, increasingly found only empty water. Elite destroyer crews, who had considered themselves masters of night combat, now found themselves helpless against an enemy they simply couldn't see. It was a profound, soul-crushing defeat. The Fletcher-Class production program revealed American industrial might at its zenith. Between 1942 and 1944, American shipyards produced a staggering 175 Fletcher-Class destroyers, more destroyers than Japan built of all types during the entire war. Each ship carried radar systems more sophisticated than anything in the Japanese fleet. The SG radar sets were churned out by Western Electric, Westinghouse, and General Electric at a rate that defied Japanese comprehension. The magnetron tubes, the very heart of radar which Japan couldn't manufacture reliably, were mass-produced in American factories. By war's end, the United States had produced over 100,000 radar sets of all types. This disparity wasn't just about quantity. American radar improved continuously. The SG radar evolved through multiple versions, each iteration increasing range, accuracy, and discrimination. By 1944, American destroyers carried radar systems that could detect a surface submarine at 18 miles and track a periscope at 3 miles. Meanwhile, Japanese radar development stagnated. Their Naval Electrical Research Department had only 300 staff by August 1943, compared to MIT's 4,000 employees. Critical components required materials Japan couldn't obtain. Most crucially, Japan lacked the vast electronics industry that underpinned America's technological surge. As radar negated traditional night fighting tactics, the Imperial Navy desperately sought new doctrines. Orders from Combined Fleet Headquarters began acknowledging American radar superiority and emphasizing radical maneuvering and acceptance of higher casualties. These weren't strategies. They were a complete capitulation to American technological dominance. The Imperial Navy that had once sought night battles now actively avoided them. When forced to fight, they employed tactics that accepted severe losses just for the possibility of achieving torpedo launch positions. Training programs struggled futilely. The torpedo school at Yokosuka attempted to develop blind launch techniques, firing spreads of torpedoes at calculated positions without visual contact. Success rates were minimal. The Naval War College developed new night fighting doctrines based on, and this is chilling, accepting catastrophic casualties. Even Japan's submarine force, initially less affected, soon encountered radar's terrifying reach. Fleet submarines, attempting to recharge batteries on the surface at night, discovered that darkness no longer provided safety. The SG radar could detect a surfaced submarine at ranges exceeding 15 miles, far beyond visual range even in daylight. Japanese submarines, dependent on surface running for speed and battery charging, found their operational effectiveness crippled. Transit speeds plummeted from 15 knots surface to 3 knots submerged. Battery life limited underwater endurance to hours rather than days. American destroyer escorts, bristling with radar, hunted Japanese submarines with deadly efficiency. The USS England sank 6 Japanese submarines in 12 days during May 1944, all detected initially by radar. Japanese submarine losses reached catastrophic levels by late 1944. Japanese naval officers drew chilling parallels between their radar disadvantage and the B-29 bombing campaign. Just as American bombers struck from altitudes beyond Japanese interceptor reach, American destroyers struck from beyond visual range. Technology had created a sanctuary from which Americans could attack without risk. The psychological parallel was exact. Fighter pilots watching B-29s cruise overhead beyond their ceiling experienced the same helplessness as destroyer crews being shelled by invisible enemies. Traditional warrior skills, courage, training, spirit, meant nothing against technological superiority that prevented engagement entirely. The Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 provided the final devastating confirmation. The largest naval battle in history became a technological mismatch. During the battle off Samar, the destroyer USS Johnston, under Commander Ernest Evans, engaged Japanese battleships using radar-directed fire in rain squalls and smoke. Despite being vastly outgunned, American destroyer escorts used radar to coordinate attacks through smoke screens that completely blinded Japanese optical rangefinders. The Japanese ships still used color-coded dye in their shells. Yamato used white, Nagato brilliant pink, Haruna greenish-yellow, Congo blood red, so optical spotters could identify fall of shot. This antiquated practice, necessitated by a lack of fire control radar, contrasted starkly with American radar-controlled automatic firing systems. In Surigao Strait, American destroyers launched coordinated torpedo attacks from beyond visual range, guided entirely by radar. The battleship Fuso was torpedoed and sunk by destroyers her crew never even saw. Japanese forces entered the strait piecemeal and were destroyed by radar-directed fire from ships they couldn't locate. The Battle of Vella Gulf on August 6 to 7, 1943, demonstrated complete American mastery of radar-directed combat. Commander Frederick Moosbrugger's 6 destroyers detected 4 Japanese destroyers carrying 950 troops at 11:33 p.m. Using radar, the American force closed to optimal torpedo range undetected. The result was devastating. 3 Japanese destroyers, Hagikaze, Arashi, and Kawakaze, were sunk with 1,110 Japanese sailors and soldiers killed. American casualties 0. Not a single hit was scored on U.S. ships. Captain Tomichi Har, commanding the sole Japanese survivor, Shigyur later called it a perfect American victory. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, termed the battle a little classic of naval warfare, demonstrating how completely radar had reversed the night combat advantage. On November 25, 1943, Captain Arleigh Burke's destroyer Squadron 23 achieved another perfect radar victory at Cape St. George. Burke's Little Beavers detected 5 Japanese destroyers at 141 degrees, tracked them undetected, and launched devastating attacks. 3 Japanese destroyers, Onami, Makanami, and Yugiri, were sunk with 647 Japanese killed. American losses, 0 casualties, 0 damage. Burke's after-action report was clinical. Entire engagement conducted by radar plot. Visual contact with enemy never achieved nor required. This battle, more than any other, convinced Japanese naval leadership that night surface combat was no longer viable against radar-equipped American forces. It marked the last surface engagement of the Solomon Islands campaign and effectively ended Japanese attempts to use destroyer forces in night combat. The American production figures alone scream the true technological gulf. United States production, 1942-1944. 175 Fletcher-Class destroyers. Approximately 1,000 SG radar sets. Over 100,000 radar sets of all types. 250,000 cavity magnetrons produced. 2.5 million radio tubes monthly by 1944. 50,000 trained radar technicians. 1.5 billion invested in radar development in 1940s dollars. Japanese production, 1942-1944. 32 destroyers of all types. Approximately 300 radar sets total, all types. 50,000 radio tubes monthly at peak. 500 partially trained radar technicians. Minimal investment in radar development. The disparity exceeded 50 to 1 in crucial areas. America had more radar sets on destroyers alone than Japan produced for all purposes. Every Fletcher-class destroyer represented industrial capacity. Japan wouldn't achieve for decades. Japanese naval training programs never successfully adapted. The infrastructure of 20 years, night vision training, lookout schools, optical ranging systems, became obsolete overnight but couldn't be replaced. The few Japanese radar sets available were primitive and unreliable. The Type 22 surface search radar, when it worked, had less than half the American SG radar's capability. More critically, it lacked the discrimination to separate targets or direct accurate gunfire. It used only an A-scope display, showing range as a spike on a line, rather than the SG's revolutionary PPI that showed all contacts on a map-like display. Training on these inferior sets proved counterproductive. Officers learned to distrust radar after multiple failures, and reverted to visual methods despite their inadequacy. The waters around Guadalcanal, dubbed Iron Bottom Sound for the ships resting on the seafloor, became the laboratory where radar warfare was perfected. The evolution was tragically documented in Japanese operational losses during night engagements. Augsept 1942, pre-SG, Japanese losses nearly equal to American. Oknav 1942, early SG. Japanese losses double American. Dec 1942, John 1943, SG dominance. Japanese losses triple American. Feb 1943 onward. Japanese losses catastrophic, American minimal. By the end of the Guadalcanal campaign, Japan had lost 40 destroyers in 16 months. The night fighting advantage, the very cornerstone of Japanese naval strategy, was completely reversed. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, rooted in samurai tradition and personal combat excellence, the radar revolution represented a cultural catastrophe. The premise that technology could replace warrior skill contradicted fundamental Japanese military philosophy. Young Japanese officers, raised on tales of samurai valor, struggled to comprehend warfare where the enemy was invisible and unreachable. The radar gap challenged Japanese racial theories that had portrayed Americans as spiritually weak, dependent on technology, because they lacked warrior courage. It was a profound existential blow. Commander Tamichi Har, that lone survivor from Pearl Harbor, published his memoir in 1961. While it contains some factual errors, his assessment of the radar war stands as the most comprehensive first-hand account from the Japanese perspective. Har participated in 16 major naval battles and witnessed the complete transformation of naval warfare. He survived to see the Imperial Navy's night-fighting supremacy utterly reversed by American radar. Admiral Raizo Tanaka, the commander of the Tokyo Express runs, published his own assessment in 1956, acknowledging that American radar had fundamentally changed naval warfare, rendering traditional Japanese night fighting tactics obsolete. The radar war forced a philosophical reckoning within Japanese military culture. The fundamental premise of Bushido, that spiritual superiority could overcome material disadvantage, was shattered by oscilloscopes and magnetrons. Post-war Japanese military philosophy had to reconcile traditional warrior culture with technological warfare. The lesson was absolute. In modern war, technology is not supplementary but supreme. Those who see first win, those who see farthest dominate. The final accounting of the radar war in the Pacific provides stark quantification of this technological revolution. Japanese destroyer losses, primarily surface, combat, 1942, Nov Dec, 4, 1943, 31, 1944, 28, 1945, to AUG, 14, American. Destroyer losses, night surface combat, 1942, Nov Dec 3, 1943, 4, 1944, 1, 1945, 0. The horror technology gap by 1944 was undeniable. 175 American destroyers with effective radar, 0 Japanese destroyers with effective radar. An American radar range advantage of 200–300%. The Japanese night vision advantage? Negated completely. These numbers tell the story of a revolution that transformed naval warfare in less than 2 years. The Imperial Japanese Navy, which had spent decades perfecting night combat, was defeated by technology that didn't even exist when their training began. The Fletcher-Class destroyers, with their SG radar sets, achieved something unprecedented in military history: the complete negation of an enemy's primary tactical advantage through technological superiority. Japanese night fighting expertise, carefully cultivated since 1904, was rendered worthless by magnetrons and oscilloscopes mass-produced in American factories. The Imperial Japanese Navy entered the war confident that superior night fighting skills would offset American material advantages. By war's end, radar had proven that technological superiority could completely negate human skill, training, and tradition. The Fletcher-Class destroyers with their SG radar sets didn't just win the destroyer war. They fundamentally transformed naval warfare from art to science, from human skill to electronic detection, from warrior tradition to technological supremacy. The Japanese officers who survived understood a fundamental, painful truth. The age of visual naval combat ended in the waters around Guadalcanal, replaced forever by electronic warfare that cared nothing for courage, tradition, or the warrior spirit. They had been the undisputed masters of night combat, perfecting their skills across decades of training. But in just 18 months, American radar turned their mastery into obsolescence, their expertise into irrelevance, and their night-fighting advantage into a fatal liability. The darkness that had been their greatest ally became their tomb, and the Americans who wielded radar became the undisputed masters of the night. The revolution was complete, irreversible, and devastating. In the end, those who could see won, and those who remained blind to technological change were condemned to defeat in the very darkness they once ruled. This is a story of how a single technological leap can change everything. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would you have done if your lifelong expertise suddenly became your biggest weakness, all because of an enemy you couldn't even see? Let me know what you think in the comments below.